I was standing in ankle-deep mud, watching a man clutch his chest, while my mother-in-law screamed about the price of an ambulance. The rain was hammering the tin roof so hard I could barely think. The smell was suffocating, industrial bug spray mixed with the stale beer soaking into the hem of my dress. I was wearing a maroon crushed velvet gown that I can only describe as Game of Thrones, on a clearance rack budget. It weighed 15 pounds wet. It felt like a suit of lead armor. My hands shook as I gripped a plastic tray of cold, soggy hot dogs. Then came the thud. Near the rusted oil drum they called a grill. Gary dropped. 1 second he was flipping burgers. The next, he was face down in the sludge. He rolled over, clutching his shirt, face gray. My chest! I can't breathe. Clatter. The tray of hot dogs slipped from my hands. He's having a heart attack, someone screamed. Call 911. I ripped my phone out. No, put that away. Linda, the mother of the bride, lunged at me. She had a cigarette dangling from her lip and pure financial terror in her eyes. Do not call an ambulance. We are not paying $2,000 for a ride. We'll drive him. He's dying, Linda, my husband screamed. Get him in the Subaru, she shrieked, flicking ash onto the dirt floor. In the middle of this insanity. I looked at the bride, Vanessa. She wasn't looking at the dying man. She was staring at the hot dogs in the mud. She sighed, checked her nails, and rolled her eyes. She's bored, I realized. Her stepdad is collapsing, and she's annoyed that it's interrupting dinner service. The absurdity hit me like a slap to the face. I am in a leaking barn. I am wearing wet upholstery fabric, and I am watching a medical emergency turn into a budget dispute. And the craziest part? This isn't even the worst thing that happened today. This nightmare didn't start with the rain. It started 3 years ago, with a pair of gray sweatpants. To understand why I was standing in a mud pit watching a man clutch his chest, you have to rewind. You have to go back to the before times. Specifically, to my wedding day 3 years ago. It was supposed to be perfect. Black tie, dim lights, jazz quartet, a sea of tuxedos and silk gowns. And then there was the glitch in the matrix. At the head table, right next to the best man, sat Vanessa. She wasn't wearing a dress. She wasn't even wearing business casual. Vanessa was slumped in her chair, wearing a pair of heather gray sweatpants and an oversized hoodie with a bleach stain on the cuff. I remember walking over, holding my champagne, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Hey, Vanessa, everything okay? Can I get you anything? She didn't sit up. She just scrolled on her phone, the blue light illuminating a face that looked bored to death. She finally side-eyed my dress. The lace, the silk, the detail work I'd saved 2 years to afford. She let out a wet, dismissive scoff. I guess I just don't feel the need to show off how much money I have, she muttered. Must be nice, though, to be so privileged. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Privileged? Because I didn't wear gym clothes to a formal event? That was the first red flag. But God, it wasn't the last. Over the next 3 years, the red flags turned into a parade. When she moved in with my brother-in-law, Kyle, she brought her mother, Linda. Neither worked. Vanessa refused to get a job because she was protecting her peace. Instead, she sat on Kyle's couch, eating his food, complaining that he was financially abusing her by not buying the right organic snacks. I tried to keep my distance. I really did, but you can't outrun family. Cut to yesterday afternoon. I was folding laundry when the front door opened. Mark, my husband, walked in. Mark is usually a golden retriever of a man. Happy, easygoing. But he looked like he'd just been audited by the IRS. He closed the door softly, leaning his back against it. What? I asked. What happened? He exhaled, a long, shaky breath. Kyle called. They set a date. Okay, I said, feeling the dread pool in my stomach. That's good. And, Mark winced, looking at me with dead eyes. They picked a theme. Mark tossed his phone onto the kitchen island, like it was a live grenade. Read the email, he said. It's a lot. The subject line read, Official Royal Decree for the Union of Kyle and Vanessa. My vision blurred. I started reading. Hear ye, it began. To all loyal subjects, we require your presence at the grand feast. Please tell me this is a joke, I whispered. I scrolled down. It wasn't an invitation. It was a ransom note. Requirement 1. All guests must purchase authentic medieval attire. No rentals. Authentic fabrics only. Requirement 2. The venue is 2 hours north. No hotels. Please plan to camp. Requirement 3. To keep costs down, every guest unit must bring a dish that serves 10 people. We have to cater their wedding? I looked at Mark. We have to drive 2 hours into the woods, dress like extras from Robin Hood, and feed their guests? Keep reading, Mark said. His voice was hollow. I scrolled to the bottom. Special request. Sarah, since we blew the budget on the venue, we aren't hiring a photographer. Since you have the new iPhone, we are assigning you to take all the candid shots. Thanks. The room tilted. My ears started ringing, a high-pitched whine. Tinnitus. They wanted me to be a guest, a caterer, and a photographer. I was about to throw the phone through the drywall when the back door slammed open. It was Mark's little sister, Lily. She's 15, sweet kid. Today her face was blotchy, mascara running down her cheeks. She was hyperventilating. Lily? Mark stepped forward. What's wrong? Lily choked on a sob. Vanessa just texted me. She said I have to come up the day before the wedding to peel potatoes and prep the meat. My blood turned to ice. But that's Saturday. It's my birthday, Lily cried. I told her we had plans, and she said if I didn't come to help, I was being a brat, and I didn't care about my brother. Snap. The buzzing in my ears stopped. I tasted copper, adrenaline. Give me the phone, I said. I didn't wait for Mark. I dialed Vanessa. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was sickeningly sweet. Vanessa, I said. It's Sarah. We need to talk about Lily. Oh, good. Is she coming up early? We have 50 pounds of potatoes. No, I said. She isn't. It's her birthday, Vanessa. Asking a child to cancel her birthday to work as your kitchen staff? It's not happening. Silence. Then a sigh. A heavy, disappointed sigh. Oh, Sarah, she cooed. I was worried you'd react like this. You're always so aggressive. I'm trying to include Lily in a family bonding moment. I'm trying to give her responsibility. And you're twisting it into something ugly? I'm not twisting anything, I said, gripping the counter. You are exploiting her. If you're going to be this toxic, she hissed, the mask slipping, then don't come. We don't want that kind of negative energy at our ceremony. Cake. She hung up on me. I stood there, stunned. But before I could even process it, Mark's phone lit up. A text from his mother. Mark, why is Sarah attacking Vanessa? Vanessa is crying hysterically. She says Sarah called her names and threatened to ruin the wedding. Why is your wife trying to tear this family apart? I stared at the screen. My mouth went dry. She hadn't just hung up. She had immediately called the in-laws and spun a web of lies so thick you'd need a machete to cut through it. She was gaslighting the entire family before I'd even put the phone down.
Wow, stealing a teenager's birthday and then playing the victim? Vanessa isn't just a bridezilla, she is a master manipulator. Before we head to the costume shop to prepare for this royal nightmare, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss the karma that is coming her way.
The air in discount Halloween and costumes smelled like mothballs and desperation. I stood in front of a warped mirror, holding up a dress that looked less like medieval queen and more like Las Vegas magician's assistant. It was a violently bright cream color with fake gold trim that scratched my skin just looking at it. "It's distinct," Mark said. He was holding a polyester tunic that looked like a potato sack dyed brown. I stared at my reflection. A manic, intrusive thought bubbled up. Jousting. I closed my eyes and let the image play out. Me, in full armor, galloping toward the head table. Vanessa, screaming. Splat! Me, knocking the bride into a mud pit with a 10-foot lance. A dark, involuntary giggle escaped my throat. "You know," I said, turning to Mark, my voice dripping with dangerous sarcasm. "I should really lean into this. I should rent the biggest, whitest dress they have. Maybe hire 2 guys to carry my train and answer everything with, 'Yes, my queen.'" Mark didn't laugh. He looked exhausted. Dark circles were carved under his eyes. "Sarah, please, don't. Just take the photos she wants. Don't make waves." I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't just tired. He was terrified. Another phrase I'd read flashed in my mind. Isolating people is the first sign of abuse. If we didn't go, if we boycotted this circus, Vanessa would use it. She would spin the narrative. She would play the victim, cut Mark off, and leave Kyle stranded on an island with her. "Fine," I exhaled, tossing the scratchy dress onto the counter. "We're going, but I am not promising I'll be nice." 2 a.m. the night before. The kitchen was a war zone. The air was thick, humid, and smelled aggressively of sulfur. "They won't peel," Mark shouted, slamming a hard-boiled egg onto the counter. Crack! We were tasked with making 50 deviled eggs and a king's casserole for the reception at 2 in the morning, because Vanessa had texted at 10 p.m. to remind us that store-bought food isn't authentic to the time period. I was standing over the sink, my hands slick with mayonnaise and resentment. I picked up an egg. The shell stuck to the white, tearing off chunks. It looked pockmarked, mangled, ugly. "Just serve them ugly," I snapped. "They're going to be eaten in a barn, Mark. Nobody cares." "Vanessa cares!" Mark spun around wild-eyed. He was scraping the bottom of a mixing bowl like his life depended on it. "If we show up with ugly eggs, she's going to say we disrespected the feast. She's going to say we're sabotaging her." "She is gaslighting you." I slammed the spoon down. The noise cracked through the quiet house like a gunshot. "She's stressed," Mark yelled back. "It's her wedding." "Stop it," I shouted. "Stop making excuses for her. Mark, look at us. It is 2 in the morning. We are peeling 50 eggs for a wedding we are guests at." I grabbed the casserole dish, waving it in the air. "This isn't normal. You don't ask guests to cater your wedding unless it's a church potluck. This is trashy, Mark. It is tacky, entitled, and trashy." "Lower your voice," Mark hissed, glancing toward the hallway where our daughter was sleeping. "We committed to this. We are doing it." "We are being played," I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. "She treats you like hired help. She treats your sister like a scullery maid, and we're just letting her." Mark didn't answer. He just turned back to the mangled eggs, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked broken. I stopped arguing. The fight drained out of me. It was replaced by something colder, something harder. 4 a.m. We packed the car in silence. It was pitch black outside. Under the harsh glow of the street lamp, the trunk looked like a crime scene. On the left, the velvet costumes wrapped in plastic. On the right, 2 giant Tupperware containers of deviled eggs that smelled like onion powder and regret. I slammed the trunk shut. Thud. We weren't going to a wedding. We were driving into a trap. And the worst part? We had the map. We saw the red flags. And we were driving straight off the cliff anyway. The GPS died at mile marker 42. 1 second, the blue line was guiding us toward ye old wedding barn. The next, black screen. Outside, the sky had turned the color of a fresh bruise. The rain wasn't falling. It was being thrown at the windshield. "Turn around," my brain whispered. "Turn around right now." But we didn't. We slid sideways into the parking lot, a cow pasture that had been turned into a swamp. We opened the doors, and the smell hit us like a physical slap. Wet hay, manure, and pure, unadulterated anxiety. Before my velvet shoe could touch the sludge, a figure sprinted out of the gloom. It was Kyle, the groom. He was soaked. His tunic clung to his chest like wet tissue paper. He looked manic. "Where were you?" he screamed over the thunder. "We were supposed to rehearse." Mark stepped out into the mud. "You told us no rehearsal, Kyle." "I changed my mind." Kyle was vibrating, wiping rain from his eyes. "I sent a mental message. I thought you knew. Get inside. She is freaking out." We ran for the barn. If the outside was grim, the inside was a gothic nightmare. No flowers, just flickering electric lanterns. And bugs, moths the size of bats, swarming the halogen work lights. The ceremony was a blur of shivering and damp velvet. But the photographer? She was a nightmare, a high school friend with a DSLR she didn't know how to use. Every time I tried to watch the vows, flash, a lens shoved 2 inches from my nose. Then came the reception. 1 long table, 45 guests, 0 food. "Where is the buffet?" I whispered. My stomach gave a loud, angry growl. "It's coming," Mark whispered back. Vanessa said to wait. So we waited. 1 hour, then 2. The hunger in the room was turning violent. But Vanessa? She was in her element. She sat on her throne, a wicker chair, barking orders. "Take a picture of me," she pointed a manicured finger at me. "Sarah, get a candid, make me look regal." I stood up. The malicious compliance kicked in. I pulled out my phone. I didn't zoom in. I didn't find the light. I knelt down and framed the shot perfectly. In the frame, Vanessa looked 3 feet tall, and the glowing red emergency exit sign appeared to be growing directly out of her head like a demonic horn. Click. "Got it," I said, my voice ice cold. "Stunning." I took 10 more, blurry shots of the mud, a close-up of a moth frying on a light bulb, a portrait of Linda, the mother of the bride, ripping a cigarette outside. Speaking of Linda, she stumbled back inside. "Food's coming," she announced. "Gary's almost done." And then, crash, the famous heart attack. I watched it happen. Gary dropped the spatula. He grabbed his chest. He hit the dirt. Thud. "My heart!" he screamed. "No ambulance!" Linda shrieked, dragging him toward the Subaru like a sack of potatoes. "We'll drive him!" They sped off. Silence descended on the barn. 45 people in costumes. No parents, no food, just the sound of rain and bug zappers. Vanessa stood up. She looked at the guests. She didn't look sad. She looked annoyed. "Well," she snapped, gesturing to the grill outside in the pouring rain. "Someone has to flip the burgers. The meat is going to spoil." The silence stretched thin. "Are you kidding?" a cousin asked. "I am the bride," Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking. "I am in a gown. I cannot cook. Someone needs to go out there and fix my dinner." Mark looked at me. I looked at Mark. And we broke. For the next 45 minutes, my husband and I, dressed like budget royalty, stood in the freezing rain, flipping half-frozen hamburger patties on a rusted oil drum. Grease splattered onto my velvet sleeves. My hair was plastered to my skull. We carried the platters inside. The guests descended on the meat like starving wolves. I walked over to the corner. Kyle was sitting on a hay bale, head in hands. He looked small, defeated. I reached into my purse and pulled out a smashed protein bar. "Kyle," I said. He looked up. His eyes were red. He didn't speak. He just tore the wrapper open and ate it in 2 bites. Chocolate smearing on his lip. He chewed slowly, staring blankly at his new wife, who was currently screaming at a bridesmaid for not refilling her water glass. He didn't say a word. But as I watched him swallow that dry protein bar in the dark, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't watching a wedding. I was watching a funeral. The sound of the car door slamming shut was the most beautiful symphony I had ever heard. Thunk! Inside the cabin, the air was warm and smelled like leather and sanity. Outside, the gothic nightmare of the barn faded into the rearview mirror, swallowed by the darkness. Mark reached over and cranked the heater up to full blast. We drove in silence for the first 10 miles, the rhythmic thwack hiss of the windshield wipers acting as a metronome, slowing down our heart rates. "Did you notice?" Mark asked, his eyes fixed on the wet asphalt. "Notice what? That I have hamburger grease in my hair?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "Vanessa's family. Linda, Gary, the cousins. They vanished." "What do you mean?" "After the cake was cut, they just dissolved. They left us there with the raw meat and the bugs. I didn't see a single one of them during cleanup." I leaned back, peeling a piece of dried mud off my velvet sleeve. "Grifters, Mark. They are carnival folk. They got their free meal and they bailed." Speaking of free meals, I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the dark car. "You need to see the official wedding album I created." I scrolled through the camera roll, holding it up for him at red lights. "Look at this one," I said, pointing to a blurry gray smudge. "That's the mud. I call it Despair in Monochrome. And this one? That's Vanessa's foot next to a crushed beer can. It captures the essence of the romance. Don't you think?" Mark actually cracked a smile. "You are petty." "I am compliant," I corrected, maliciously. "So?" I opened Facebook to upload them, but I stopped. My thumb hovered over the screen. "Mark," I whispered, "look." Linda, the mother of the bride, had just posted an album titled "My Baby Girl's Fairy Tale Wedding." I clicked on it. My jaw dropped. "Wait a minute," I said, squinting. That's my picture." I scrolled. "And that's your dad's picture. And Mark, that's the blurry photo of the floor I took an hour ago." I looked at him wide-eyed. "Linda was outside smoking cigarettes for 3 hours. She didn't take a single photo. She waited for us to upload ours to the family chat, saved them, and reposted them as her own. She stole my blurry photo of the mud and captioned it, 'Magical Night.'" Mark let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "They aren't just rude, Sarah. They're absolutely shameless." "No," I said, locking my phone. "They're frauds, and the cracks are already showing." 1 week later. The sun was streaming into my kitchen, bright and unforgiving. It hit the granite countertops, making them sparkle, a stark contrast to the gloom of the barn. I was on my second cup of coffee, enjoying the silence. No bugs, no rain, no demands. The front door opened. Mark walked in. He didn't look stressed anymore. He looked stunned, like he had just seen a UFO land on the front lawn. "You are not," he said, putting his keys on the counter, "going to believe this." "What?" I asked, blowing on my coffee. "Did Vanessa demand a post-wedding invoice?" "It's Gary," Mark said. "The heart attack." I put the mug down. "Is he okay? Did he need a stent?" Mark stared at me for a long beat. A slow, disbelief-filled grin spread across his face. "He's fine, Sarah. He's completely fine. He didn't have a blockage. He didn't have a murmur. He had a lack of motivation." "What?" "He faked it," Mark said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He faked the heart attack. Apparently he saw 50 hungry people and a pile of raw meat, and he decided he simply didn't want to cook it. So he grabbed his chest and hit the dirt." I stared at him. My brain tried to process the audacity. I started to giggle. "He faked a coronary to get out of flipping burgers?" "Linda didn't even take him to the hospital," Mark continued, laughing now too. "She drove him around the block to a Wendy's. They sat in the parking lot eating spicy nuggets until the reception was over." I lost it. I laughed until I couldn't breathe. I laughed until tears ran down my face. It was the kind of hysterical, purifying laughter that burns out all the trauma. It gets better, Mark said, pulling out his phone. The aunts found out. Look at the group chat. He handed me the phone. It was a bloodbath. Aunt Karen. So we ate raw hamburger in the rain while Gary ate a Frosty? I am done. Do not contact me. Cousin Mike. Trash. Absolute trash behavior. I want my gift back. Vanessa had tried to defend them, claiming it was a panic attack induced by stress. But no one was buying it. The curtain had been pulled back. The royal couple and the queen mother were exposed as people who would fake a medical emergency to avoid 15 minutes of work. Kyle was embarrassed, of course, but he was talking to Mark again. He was starting to see the cracks, too. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but at least he knew we were waiting for him with a lifeboat. I looked at the photo on the fridge, the one clear picture I had taken. It was of the muddy barn, looking desolate and sad in the rain. I took it down. I walked over to the trash can, crumple, toss. We survived the redneck wedding. We survived the sweatpants, the entitlement, and the medical fraud. But I made a promise to myself that morning. We'll be there for Kyle. We'll be polite. But if Vanessa asks for a medieval baby shower, I'm not sending a gift. I'm sending a cease and desist.
So let's be real. Faking a heart attack just to get out of cooking hamburgers is a level of lazy I have never seen before. I need to know, what is the wildest excuse you have ever heard to get out of doing work? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed seeing this entitled bride get humbled, smash that like button on your way out.